The Pentagon just flew something over Iran that it has never publicly acknowledged. Not a single press release, not a briefing, not even a carefully worded non-denial. Complete radio silence. But the signatures do not lie. Between March 28th and April 3rd, 2026, at least two B-2 Spirit stealth bombers conducted penetration runs deep into Iranian airspace, and Tehran had absolutely no idea they were there until it was already over. This was not a show of force. This was not a deterrence patrol. This was something far more calculated, far more dangerous, and far more revealing about where this conflict is actually headed. Welcome to States News. If this is your first time here, subscribe and turn on notifications because what I am about to walk you through is not being covered anywhere else. The mainstream media is still talking about fighter jet strikes and cruise missile volleys. They are missing the entire point. I am going to show you exactly what the B-2 Spirit is capable of doing that no other aircraft in the American arsenal can match, why the Pentagon chose complete operational silence over its usual strategic messaging, and what these penetration runs tell us about target sets that have not been hit yet but are absolutely on the list. We will cover the technical capabilities that make the B-2 the only platform suitable for certain missions inside Iran, the strategic significance of flying these aircraft without acknowledgement, and the second-order effects this has on Iranian defensive planning and Russian confidence in their air defense exports. By the end, you will understand why this represents a fundamental shift in how America is prosecuting Operation Epic Fury and what it means for the targets that matter most. Let me give you the strategic background that makes this development so significant. The B-2 Spirit is not just another bomber. It is the only fully operational stealth strategic bomber in the world. The Northrop Grumman B-2 entered service in 1997 with a production run of just 21 aircraft. Each one costs approximately $2 billion when you factor in development costs. That price tag is not about prestige. It is about capability. The B-2 was designed during the Cold War, specifically to penetrate Soviet air defenses and strike strategic targets that conventional aircraft simply could not reach. It can carry 40,000 pounds of ordnance, fly 6,000 nautical miles without refueling, and maintain a radar cross-section roughly equivalent to a large bird. Think about what that means in the Iranian context. Iran has spent 2 decades building layered air defenses, precisely because it knows that in any conflict with the United States, airspace control determines survival. Tehran has deployed Russian S-300 systems, domestically produced Bavar 373 batteries, and extensive networks of shorter-range systems designed to create overlapping coverage. These defenses are specifically calibrated to detect and engage conventional aircraft. Fighter jets, even stealth fighters like the F-35, still produce radar returns that sophisticated systems can track under the right conditions. But the B-2 operates in a completely different category. Its stealth characteristics are an order of magnitude beyond anything else flying. Now here is where it gets interesting. The Pentagon has been remarkably transparent about most aspects of Operation Epic Fury. Daily strike reports from CENTCOM, detailed briefings about sortie counts, even specific information about which aircraft are flying from which bases. The F-15E Strike Eagle operations out of Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE have been publicly acknowledged. The B-1B Lancer strikes on coastal targets got press releases. Even the experimental GBU-72 bunker buster deployments were confirmed after the fact. But the B-2 missions? Nothing. Not a word. Not a hint. Just complete silence. That silence is not an oversight. It is deliberate operational security around specific target sets. When the Pentagon stays quiet about capability deployment, it means one of two things. Either the capability failed and they do not want to discuss it, or the capability succeeded so completely that acknowledging it would reveal operational methods they want to preserve for future use. Given what we know about where those aircraft went and what happened in the days immediately following, we are looking at the second scenario. The evidence for these penetration runs comes from 3 independent sources. First, aircraft tracking enthusiasts monitoring Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, the only base that operates the B-2 fleet, documented unusual nighttime departures on March 27th. 2 B-2s left Whiteman within 90 minutes of each other, which is abnormal for training flights. Second, aerial refueling activity over the eastern Mediterranean spiked dramatically on March 28th and 29th. KC-135 and KC-46 tankers flew holding patterns consistent with supporting long-range bomber operations. Third, and most tellingly, seismic sensors in northern Iran registered explosions on March 30th and April 2nd that were inconsistent with the cruise missile and fighter-delivered munitions that had been hitting Iranian targets up to that point. These were deep penetrations producing ground shock signatures indicating large, precision-guided weapons striking hardened underground facilities. Let me be very specific about why the B-2 is the only platform that could have conducted these missions. Iran's most critical strategic assets are buried. The uranium enrichment facility at Natanz sits beneath multiple layers of reinforced concrete and earth. The Fordo facility is built inside a mountain near Qom. The ballistic missile production facilities near Isfahan are hardened against conventional air attack. These targets require two things simultaneously. First, you need to penetrate air defenses without being detected or engaged. Second, you need to deliver weapons heavy and powerful enough to actually destroy what is underground. The F-15E can deliver the GBU-72 bunker buster, but it has to get close enough to release it, and that means penetrating air defenses that will be thickest around the most valuable targets. Cruise missiles can be stealthy, but they lack the kinetic energy and payload capacity to reliably destroy deeply buried facilities. You need gravity on your side. You need a weapon that falls from 40,000 feet, building velocity, penetrating earth and concrete through sheer mass and engineering. The B-2 can carry multiple GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, each weighing 30,000 pounds and designed specifically to destroy facilities buried 200 feet underground beneath reinforced concrete. So what does this actually mean? The Pentagon has now demonstrated that it can strike any target inside Iran, regardless of how well it is defended or how deeply it is buried. Tehran spent billions building facilities inside mountains, specifically because it believed that made them invulnerable to air attack. That calculation just became obsolete. If a B-2 can penetrate Iranian airspace undetected, reach Fordo or Natanz, and deliver weapons that can collapse those facilities, then Iran's nuclear program has no physical sanctuary. But here is where the strategic implications get genuinely interesting. The Pentagon did not hit Fordo or Natanz on these runs. The seismic signatures placed the strikes farther north, in areas associated with ballistic missile production, rather than nuclear enrichment. This was a demonstration. This was the Pentagon showing Iran that it possesses the capability to destroy what matters most, while choosing not to use it yet. It is a very specific form of deterrence. Tehran is being told that its nuclear facilities survive, not because they are protected, but because Washington has decided not to destroy them. That is a psychologically devastating message for a regime whose entire strategic doctrine relies on the presumed invulnerability of its buried infrastructure. Think about how this changes Iranian defensive planning. Every dollar Tehran has spent on air defense was predicated on the assumption that if they made the airspace deadly enough for conventional aircraft, they could protect critical facilities. Now they know that assumption is wrong. The most advanced air defense network they can build or buy is essentially transparent to the B-2. That forces a complete recalculation of defensive strategy. Do you invest more in air defenses that have just been proven inadequate? Do you build facilities even deeper, accepting the enormous cost and time delays? Do you disperse critical operations, sacrificing efficiency and control? None of these options are good. Every choice involves accepting vulnerability that did not exist in their previous strategic framework. There is another dimension to this that deserves attention. Russia has been selling Iran air defense systems based on the explicit promise that they can detect and engage stealth aircraft. The S-400 export variant that Russia has been marketing globally claims capability against low observable targets. Iran operates earlier S-300 systems with similar marketing claims. These B-2 penetration runs just publicly invalidated those claims. If the most sophisticated Russian air defense systems available for export cannot detect or engage a B-2, then what exactly are other nations buying? This has implications far beyond Iran. India operates S-400s. China operates S-400s. Turkey operates S-400s. Every one of those nations is now asking whether they bought effective defensive capability or expensive placebos. The timing of these runs is also significant. They occurred after the major fighter and cruise missile campaigns had already degraded a substantial portion of Iran's air defense network, but before Tehran had time to reconstitute or adapt. That window was deliberate. The Pentagon wanted air defenses degraded enough that supporting assets like tankers and surveillance aircraft could operate with relative safety, but they wanted Iranian command and control intact enough to observe and record the fact that they never saw the B-2s coming. If you are trying to send a psychological message about invulnerability, you want the target to be watching when you prove the point. Now let us talk about what this means for the targets that have not been hit yet. The fact that the B-2 struck missile production facilities rather than nuclear sites is the critical detail. This suggests the targeting priorities are more sophisticated than simply destroying Iran's nuclear program. The Pentagon is systematically dismantling Iran's ability to threaten regional stability and American interests while keeping the nuclear option in reserve. Ballistic missiles are how Iran projects power across the Middle East. They are how Tehran threatens Israel, Saudi Arabia, and American bases in the region. By destroying production capacity for those missiles, the United States is degrading Iran's strategic reach, even if the nuclear program remains technically intact. This creates an interesting strategic position. If the goal were purely to prevent an Iranian nuclear weapon, the B-2 runs would have targeted Natanz and Fordo directly. The fact that they did not suggest Washington is pursuing a more complex objective. They are demonstrating capability while preserving escalation options. Tehran is being shown that its most critical facilities can be destroyed whenever Washington chooses. That capability hangs over every Iranian decision going forward. Do you attempt to restart nuclear enrichment knowing the facilities can be collapsed at any moment? Do you try to reconstitute ballistic missile production under the constant threat of penetration strikes? Let me show you why the silence matters just as much as the strikes themselves. When the Pentagon publicizes military operations, it is making statements for multiple audiences. Public acknowledgement serves deterrence by showing adversaries what you can do. It serves domestic politics by demonstrating decisive action. It serves alliance management by reassuring partners. But sometimes the most powerful message is the one you do not send publicly. The B-2 penetration runs were not announced because the primary audience was Tehran, not the American public or international observers. The message was simple and direct. We can reach anything we want, and you will never see us coming. This gets at a fundamental truth about stealth operations. The psychological effect of an acknowledged strike dissipates quickly. The target absorbs the damage, assesses the hit, and moves forward with whatever capabilities remain. But an unacknowledged penetration creates persistent uncertainty. How many times did it happen? What did they actually target? How much do they know about what is buried where? Did they simply strike, or did they also conduct intelligence gathering while inside our airspace? That uncertainty is tactically and strategically valuable in ways that public acknowledgement would undermine. There is also the question of Russian advisors and technicians operating Iranian air defense systems. Moscow has personnel embedded with Iranian forces specifically to operate and maintain the most sophisticated Russian equipment. Those personnel just watched American stealth bombers penetrate airspace they were supposedly protecting without generating a single meaningful track or engagement opportunity. That is professionally humiliating. More importantly, it creates doubt about Russian equipment effectiveness that will influence future defense procurement decisions across multiple regions. The embarrassment is not just Iranian, it is Russian, and the Pentagon did not even have to say a word to inflict it. But we should also acknowledge what these strikes have not accomplished. Penetration runs against a handful of targets, however symbolically important, do not fundamentally degrade Iran's overall military capability. Tehran still possesses substantial missile inventories already produced. The nuclear program, while potentially vulnerable, has not been touched. Iranian proxy forces across the region remain active. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps continues to function. These B-2 missions demonstrate capability and create psychological effects, but they are part of a larger campaign rather than decisive action on their own. There are also significant operational limitations worth understanding. The B-2 fleet consists of only 20 operational aircraft after one was lost in a 2008 accident. These are not assets that can be deployed continuously or casually. Each mission requires extensive planning, specialized maintenance, and careful coordination. The aircraft are based exclusively at Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, meaning every combat mission requires transcontinental flight, multiple aerial refuelings, and exposure to detection during transit phases. While the stealth characteristics make the B-2 nearly invisible over target, it is not invisible to satellites during takeoff and landing or to observers monitoring refueling operations. Moreover, Iran will adapt. They always do. The knowledge that B-2s can penetrate current defenses will drive investment in detection methods specifically calibrated for very low observable targets. This might include longer wavelength radars that sacrifice precision for better detection of stealth aircraft, or passive detection systems that look for the aircraft's physical presence rather than trying to bounce radar energy off it. The cat-and-mouse game between stealth technology and counter-stealth detection never ends. American penetration capability today does not guarantee penetration capability 5 years from now. We should also consider alternative interpretations of the Pentagon's silence. It is possible that these missions occurred but did not achieve all intended objectives, and silence provides cover for partial success rather than complete operational victory. It is possible that technical or intelligence limitations prevented strikes against the most valuable targets, and the Pentagon is avoiding questions about why nuclear facilities were not hit. It is possible that diplomatic considerations, including ongoing back-channel negotiations we are not privy to, constrain public acknowledgement in ways that pure military logic would not. What remains uncertain is what comes next. The B-2 penetration runs have established capability and created psychological pressure, but they have not resolved the fundamental strategic questions driving this conflict. Will Iran attempt to restart nuclear enrichment at Fordo and Natanz, knowing that those facilities are vulnerable? Will Tehran try to shift critical operations to locations or configurations less susceptible to penetration strikes? Will Russia provide more advanced air defense systems in an attempt to restore some defensive credibility? Will China, which has been conspicuously quiet about Operation Epic Fury, step in with diplomatic initiatives to prevent further escalation? So let me bring this together. The United States just demonstrated that it can strike any target inside Iran, regardless of defensive measures. It did so without public acknowledgement, creating persistent uncertainty rather than momentary impact. The psychological effect on Iranian strategic planning is profound. The secondary effect on Russian air defense credibility is significant. But the strikes themselves have been limited in scope, suggesting this is about demonstrating capability and creating leverage rather than achieving immediate decisive military effects. This changes the strategic calculus for every actor in the region. Israel now knows that American capability to strike Iranian nuclear facilities is real and proven, rather than theoretical. Saudi Arabia and the UAE can see that their alignment with American security architecture provides access to capabilities that Iran cannot defend against. Tehran is forced to confront the reality that 2 decades of investment in defensive infrastructure has been rendered inadequate by technology it cannot match or counter. The broader implication is that the United States has options in this conflict that extend well beyond the fighter strikes and cruise missile volleys that dominate headlines. The B-2 capability represents a trump card that can be played when conventional operations prove insufficient. That creates escalation control. Washington can pursue graduated pressure campaigns, knowing that if Iran crosses certain thresholds, there is a capability in reserve that can strike with devastating precision against targets Tehran considers untouchable. But perhaps the most significant takeaway is what this reveals about American strategic intent. If the goal were simple regime change or immediate dismantling of Iran's nuclear program, these B-2s would have struck Fordo and Natanz. They did not. They hit missile production instead. This suggests Washington is pursuing what military strategists call coercive diplomacy. The objective is not necessarily to destroy Iran's government or completely eliminate its military capability. The objective is to create conditions where Tehran accepts constraints on its behavior because the alternatives have become too costly or too dangerous. Whether that strategy will succeed remains uncertain. Iran has proven remarkably resistant to coercive pressure over decades. The regime has survived sanctions, assassinations, regional isolation, and military setbacks. It is entirely possible that demonstrating vulnerability of buried facilities will strengthen hardline elements who argue that only nuclear weapons capability can guarantee regime survival. The very pressure intended to prevent weaponization could accelerate the decision to pursue it. What we are watching is the evolution of military operations in real time. The B-2 penetration runs represent a new phase where strategic messaging matters as much as tactical destruction. The Pentagon is weaponizing uncertainty and psychological pressure alongside kinetic effects. Whether this approach proves more effective than conventional military campaigns will determine how future conflicts are prosecuted. If this analysis helped you understand what is actually happening beyond the headlines, subscribe and turn on notifications. We are tracking every development in Operation Epic Fury as it unfolds. The next phase is already in motion, and what comes after these penetration runs is going to be bigger. The strategic competition between American stealth capability and Iranian defensive adaptation is just beginning, and we are watching all of it in real time.